Okay guys, so we're still doing the beginning of Luke's story. I'm kind of going through how he was diagnosed and leading up to where we are today. Where I last left you off, it was about 2 weeks before Christmas. We had just left a Christmas party. We drove down to Westchester, where he screamed the entire car ride to Westchester. And everyone, I think, still thought I was crazy and there was nothing wrong with him. So anyway, we called the pediatrician's office. They're the ones who are like, don't even go to the local hospital. They're going to send you, they're going to send you right down to the children's hospital. Just go straight there. So that's what we did. We drove right down to the children's hospital in Valhalla. It's about an hour away. And he screamed the entire way to the hospital. And when we got there, I was actually pretty dead that day for whatever reason. Granted, it was also like 11 o'clock at night, maybe even closer to midnight at this point. We get there, we get in pretty quickly, we get into a room, and I'm explaining to the doctor. Now, mind you, this is a teaching hospital. So we explained to the doctor that this is what's going on, this is what's been happening, this is his medical history up until now. He's been having these things that I believe are infantile spasms. Here's a video of him doing the infantile spasm. Everywhere you look, literally Google infantile spasm right now, and it says if you think your child is having infantile spasms, you need to get to the doctor like yesterday. Like, this is a medical emergency. You need to start them on some type of medication now, because seizures can do damage each time a child has a seizure, each time an adult has a seizure, each time. It was very, not all seizures, but specific seizures can do damage to the child's brain every single time it happens. So, and the doctor said to me, well, I don't think this is an emergency. I'm sorry, what now? My baby is having potentially seizures that are not diagnosed, and this isn't an emergency? I'm like, whatever. So she goes and she gets her superior, the attending doctor, and the attending comes in. I show her the video and she's like, oh yeah, no, that does look like infantile spasms. And then he actually has one with her standing right there, and she was like, oh no, he is absolutely getting admitted. We need to get him up to neuro immediately and get him on a 24-hour video EEG like ASAP. Like, let's do this now, because that's not normal. Great. So at least we're being admitted. So we get admitted, we get upstairs. They actually got him on the EEG very, very quickly. We got a room very, very quickly. I was very surprised. They hooked him up to the monitor like in the middle of the night, and he fell asleep, and they did this video EEG. And for those of you who have never had a video EEG, basically, or have never seen your child have a video EEG, or don't even know what I'm talking about, it's these whole bunch of electrodes that go onto the head, like a whole bunch, like a lot of them, and they kind of get like glued onto the scalp, and it measures like the brain waves. And the video part of it is that they videotape them while they're on the EEG, so if they see some type of a spike in activity on the EEG, they can actually go back and they can watch what the body is doing during this time. So they hooked him up, and they also, there's like a little button, and if I think, or my husband thinks, or whoever, the nurse in there thinks that some type of activity is potentially going on, he's doing some type of movement, he's doing something that seems neurological or seems out of place or is something that I'm concerned about, I could press that button and they could look at that particular snapshot of time of the EEG. So they actually ended up keeping it on him. It was supposed to be a 24-hour video EEG. We ended up keeping it on for like 2.5 days. And honestly, the EEGs suck because your kid is connected to all these wires, and he's a baby. He wants to be held. You're trying to comfort him. You're like attached to a monitor. You have to turn the video camera every time you pick him up, and It just sucks. Video EEGs suck. To be blatantly honest. There are other things that also suck, but I do not like video EEGs. And everything, we've read the first 24 hours, it was clean, we're keeping them on a little bit longer. We've read the second 24 hours, that was also very clean, we're going to keep them on a little bit longer. Finally, they took it off, and they're like, everything looks totally normal. And I'm like, well, then what is going on? At this point, we had seen another neurologist, so this is neurologist number 4 if we're keeping track. And he thought that Luke had what is called the GLUT1 deficiency syndrome. Basically, your brain is the only organ in your body that uses straight glucose. Typically, your body produces insulin, unless you're diabetic, and the insulin is what is like a key to, like the glucose needs a key, which is the insulin, to open the door to the cells and be used as energy, except for the brain. The brain allows just glucose, it doesn't need a key. But they thought with Luke that his body was not bringing the glucose up into the brain, and it wasn't being processed right, which is why he was having, like, his brain was basically starving, because it didn't have enough nutrients, and that's what was causing all these issues. And if you look up GLUT1 deficiency syndrome, I was like, oh my god, yes, he's doing that. Oh my god, yes, he's doing that. Oh my god, yes. Like, he hit so many of the symptoms. And I was like, oh my god, this is exactly what it has. And GLUT1 deficiency syndrome, we were on their webpage, and I'm like, this is definitely what he has. And we're looking at pictures. And I remember thinking, oh my god, this little boy is on a trampoline. Oh my gosh, this little boy is talking. Oh my gosh, this little girl is riding a bike, and this one is fine, and this one is fine, and this one is fine. And it didn't seem like a terrible illness, because I at some point convinced myself that Luke had a brain tumor. That's the diagnosis I had given him, was that he had a brain tumor, he had cancer, and he was going to die. And that's what I was convinced was wrong with him. So when I'm looking at these kids who seemingly are thriving with GLUT1 deficiency syndrome, I was like, yes, this is what he has. It's not even medication that they go on. It's just like, it's actually the keto diet that these kids go on, and their brain stabilizes, and they're fine. They're living, they're running, they're playing. They're like, this is an illness we can handle. Like this, I looked at the colors. I was ready to go get my GLUT1 deficiency tattoo. Like, I was ready to run the marathon for them. Me running. It's a whole other story. And so they made up a plan that they were going to put him under, sedate him, do a spinal tap. His one of 3 that he's had so far. Do a spinal tap and do an MRI. And for the GLUT1 deficiency syndrome, they have to take blood work, then do the spinal tap, and then do blood work after the spinal tap to see where the levels are and the food and whatever. I get very similar to like a diabetic test, and except minus the spinal tap. And they were going to do an MRI because he was already being sedated, and Dr. Gannon had been begging and begging and begging and begging for us to do it. So they were just going to go ahead and do it. So this is the first time first of actually more times than I like to remember, that I had to kiss Luke and say, I'll see you after. And he was gone for 3.5 hours. And I didn't know it was literally the longest 3.5 hours you could ever imagine. It was just a very, very, very long time. And I was freaking out, and I was hungry, and I was tired, and none of us had slept or eaten in forever. And so we went down, we got lunch, and we came back up, and I was just so nervous. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was the GLUT1 deficiency syndrome. But it was very, very nerve-wracking. And so they finally bring him out, and he's so tired, and my poor little snookums. And he was hungry, and he hadn't eaten, and So we bring him back up to the room, and he's not allowed to eat until he gets this second set of blood work done. And we get back up, and I was like, are they gonna get, so I'm asking the nurse, are they gonna do the blood work? When are they coming to do the blood work? They're supposed to do the blood work, an hour after he gets up from recovery. It's been over an hour. When are they coming to do the blood work? We need to do the blood work. And finally she comes in, and she's like, oh, they don't need to do that blood work. And I said, what do you mean they don't need to do the blood work? It was supposed to be blood work, spinal tap, blood work, because he has GLUT1 deficiency syndrome, and this is what he has, and this is how they diagnose it. What do you mean they don't need to do the blood work? And she goes, they already found what's wrong with him. They don't need to do the blood work. So this is when I'm like, oh my God, he really does have a brain tumor. That's where I was stuck on. I was convinced he had a brain tumor, and I was freaking out. And Todd's like, no, maybe they took the blood when he was down in recovery. And I'm like, no, they're saying they don't need to do the blood work. Something is wrong. They found something on the MRI. And he said, no, stop being dramatic. And I'm like, Todd, they would need to do the blood work if they thought he still had GLUT1 deficiency syndrome. I'm like, they found something on the MRI. Something is not right. They know exactly what is wrong with him. I'm like, he has a brain tumor. He does not have a brain tumor. That's what I was convinced he had. And so we're at the hospital. I'm convinced he has a brain tumor. We've been in the hospital for like 4 days at this point, and it's getting very, very, very late in the day. And I know the doctor, like, it's like 4:56, let's say, and I know that all the doctors are like heading out to go eat dinner, and we probably wouldn't get results till the next morning. And I was absolutely freaking out, and Luke was not eating. Which is pretty much the story of my life. And that's where I will leave you today. I will finish up in our next video about when he was diagnosed and the days after, and we'll go from there. Talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.